In the YouTube video titled President Biden's State of the Union Address, President Biden delivered a speech outlining his vision for the future of the United States. He addressed the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, emphasizing the importance of international unity and holding Russia accountable for its aggression. Biden discussed his economic agenda, highlighting his administration's success in creating jobs and addressing the issue of inflation. He also outlined his plan to lower costs for families by focusing on prescription drugs, energy costs, childcare, and tax fairness. The president highlighted the progress made in combating the COVID-19 pandemic and outlined a path forward for a new normal. He emphasized the need for unity and bipartisanship in addressing issues like gun violence, voting rights, and mental health, and concluded by outlining his agenda to support veterans and end cancer. In the first 5 to 10 minutes of the video, President Biden began his speech by addressing the recent invasion of Ukraine by Russia. He highlighted the strength and courage of the Ukrainian people, as well as the international community's response to the invasion. Biden emphasized the importance of unity among nations to confront Putin, particularly with the imposition of economic sanctions. He highlighted the economic isolation that Russia faces as a result of these sanctions and the impact they're having on the Russian economy. Biden stressed that the U.S. and its allies are taking strong measures to hold Putin accountable for his actions and to support Ukraine in its fight for freedom. The president reassured the American people that they are strong and that the U.S. is not engaging in combat in Ukraine but is committed to defending its NATO allies. He explicitly clarified that while the U.S. is providing support to Ukraine, it is not deploying troops to fight in the conflict. He further highlighted the gravity of the situation by emphasizing the potential for Russia's aggression to continue westward, thus requiring a robust defense posture from the U.S. and its allies. From 10 to 15 minutes of the video, President Biden discusses his plan to combat inflation, which he argues is not simply a matter of lowering wages but rather lowering costs for families. He proposes several measures to achieve this goal, including capping the cost of insulin at $35 per month, allowing Medicare to negotiate lower prices for prescription drugs, and providing tax credits for weatherizing homes and businesses to reduce energy costs. He emphasizes the importance of investing in American manufacturing and infrastructure to boost the economy and create jobs, citing Intel's plans to invest $20 billion in a new semiconductor facility in Ohio. He stresses the need to increase the productive capacity of the economy and create a more competitive environment for American businesses. Biden's vision for economic growth centers on a fundamental shift away from the trickle-down model that has dominated economic policy for decades. He proposes investing in education, job training, and infrastructure to create opportunities for all Americans, not just those at the top. From 15 to 20 minutes of the video, President Biden discusses his economic vision for America, highlighting the importance of investing in the country and educating its workforce. He emphasizes the need to build the economy from the bottom up and middle out, arguing that this approach benefits all Americans, not just the wealthy. Biden touts the American Rescue Plan's success in creating jobs and stimulating economic growth, contrasting it with the trickle-down approach of previous administrations. He also emphasizes the importance of infrastructure investments, highlighting the bipartisan infrastructure law's potential to transform America and put it on a path to win the economic competition of the 21st century. He emphasizes that his administration is taking a proactive approach to addressing the economic challenges facing the nation, moving beyond rhetoric to concrete action. This approach includes not only investing in domestic manufacturing and infrastructure, but also working with international partners to create a more equitable global economic system. From 20 to 25 minutes of the video, President Biden continues to address the issue of inflation and its impact on working families. He acknowledges the economic gains made, but emphasizes the need to lower costs, not wages, to combat inflation. Biden outlines a three-pronged plan: reducing prescription drug costs, cutting energy expenses, and lowering childcare costs. He advocates for capping insulin costs, allowing Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices, and providing tax credits for energy-efficient homes and businesses. He also proposes a 15% minimum tax rate for corporations, arguing that corporations should pay their fair share. Biden's commitment to fairness is evident in his call for a more equitable tax system, arguing that corporations and the wealthy should bear a greater share of the tax burden. similar to working-class Americans. From 25 to 30 minutes of the video, President Biden addresses the issue of inflation, acknowledging that many families are struggling to keep up with their bills. He outlines his plan to combat inflation by lowering costs for families, including cutting the cost of prescription drugs, energy costs, and childcare. He emphasizes the need to increase the productive capacity of the economy by investing in American manufacturing, infrastructure, and innovation. Biden proposes a 15% minimum tax rate for corporations and closing loopholes for the wealthy, arguing that they should pay their fair share. He also highlights the role of the Federal Reserve in fighting inflation and emphasizes the need to confirm his nominees to this crucial institution. Biden's commitment to fairness and accountability is evident in his call for a more equitable tax system, arguing that corporations and the wealthy should bear a greater share of the tax burden. Similar to working-class Americans, he believes that these measures will not only alleviate the burdens of inflation but also strengthen the overall economy. From 30 to 35 minutes of the video, President Biden outlines his plan to lower costs for families and combat inflation. He argues that making America more competitive and productive will ultimately lower costs for families, proposing measures such as cutting the cost of prescription drugs, energy costs, and childcare. He emphasizes the need for corporations to pay their fair share, highlighting that some large corporations have paid no federal taxes while earning substantial profits. He proposes a 15% minimum tax rate for corporations and calls for closing loopholes that allow the wealthy to pay lower tax rates than working-class Americans. He also highlights the importance of addressing climate change as a way to lower energy costs for families and promote long-term economic growth. Biden concludes this section by emphasizing that his plan will not only lower costs but also reduce the deficit. Biden's commitment to building a more equitable society is evident in his plan to address the cost of living crisis, which disproportionately affects working-class Americans. He believes that by ensuring that corporations and the wealthy pay their fair share and by investing in renewable energy sources, he can make a tangible difference in the lives of everyday Americans. From 35 to 40 minutes of the video, President Biden discusses his plan to address the opioid epidemic. He emphasizes the need for increased funding for prevention, treatment, harm reduction, and recovery programs. Biden also calls for an end to outdated regulations that hinder doctors from prescribing treatments. To combat the flow of illicit drugs, he proposes working with state and local law enforcement to target traffickers. He acknowledges the struggles of individuals battling addiction and expresses his belief in recovery. The president highlights the success of the 23 million Americans who have achieved sobriety. Finally, he urges everyone to recognize the importance of treating addiction as a serious health issue and not as a moral failing. Biden's approach to the opioid epidemic is marked by compassion and a commitment to evidence-based solutions. He recognizes that addiction is a complex issue that requires a multi-pronged approach, including prevention, treatment, and harm reduction. From 40 to 45 minutes of the video, President Biden discusses the importance of staying vigilant against COVID-19 by continuing to stay protected with vaccines and treatments, preparing for new variants, ending the shutdown of schools and businesses, and continuing to vaccinate the world. He emphasizes the need for Americans to get back to work and move forward safely, acknowledging that the tools and resources are available. He expresses hope that Congress will quickly pass the funding needed to continue providing free vaccines, treatments, tests, and masks. He urges Americans to stop seeing each other as enemies and start seeing each other as fellow Americans, recognizing that we need to move forward together on COVID-19 and other issues. Biden's approach to the COVID-19 pandemic is rooted in science and data, recognizing the need for flexibility and adaptation as the virus continues to evolve. He emphasizes the importance of vaccination, testing, and treatment, while acknowledging the need for a return to normalcy in our daily lives. From 45 to 50 minutes of the video, President Biden discussed his plans to protect the rights of women and LGBTQ+ Americans. He emphasized the importance of protecting the constitutional right affirmed in Roe v. Wade, which is under attack, and called for preserving a woman's right to choose. He also urged Congress to pass the Equality Act to ensure protection for LGBTQ+ Americans. He highlighted the recent onslaught of state laws targeting transgender Americans and their families, which he considers simply wrong. He reassured younger transgender Americans that he will always have their back as their president, allowing them to be themselves and reach their full potential. Biden concluded this segment by emphasizing that he believes in progress, not regression, and that protecting these rights is essential for moving forward as a nation. Biden's commitment to safeguarding the rights of all Americans is evident in his unwavering support for reproductive rights and LGBTQ+ rights. He sees these issues as fundamental to a just and equitable society, and he is committed to fighting for their protection. From 50 to 55 minutes of the video, President Biden addresses the issue of protecting the rights of women, specifically mentioning the constitutional right affirmed in Roe v. Wade, which is under attack. He emphasizes the need to protect access to health care and preserve a woman's right to choose, and calls for advancing maternal health care for all Americans. He also highlights the importance of passing the Bipartisan Equality Act to protect LGBTQ+ Americans and criticizes the onslaught of state laws targeting transgender individuals and their families. Biden reiterates his commitment to standing up for LGBTQ+ Americans and ensuring they can be themselves and reach their full potential. He concludes this segment by stating that while it may seem like Americans never agree, there are actually many areas of common ground, and he cites the passing of 80 bipartisan bills last year as evidence of this. Biden's call for unity is not simply a rhetorical gesture, but rather a call for a more cooperative and inclusive approach to governing. He believes that by working together, Americans can overcome the challenges they face and build a brighter future. From 55 to 60 minutes of the video, President Biden emphasized the importance of supporting veterans, particularly those affected by toxic exposures from burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan. He highlighted the case of Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson, who died from cancer linked to burn pit exposure, and his widow, Danielle Robinson. Biden announced the expansion of VA benefits for veterans suffering from 9 respiratory cancers and called on Congress to pass a law guaranteeing comprehensive health care for veterans affected by toxic exposures. He also advocated for ending the opioid epidemic, taking on mental health challenges, and strengthening privacy protections for children on social media platforms. Biden concluded the address by expressing his optimism for America's future and highlighting the nation's ability to overcome challenges and seize opportunities. He declared that the state of the union is strong because the American people are strong, emphasizing unity and collective action. He closed with a message of hope and a call to action, urging Americans to work together to create a brighter future. From 60 to 62 minutes of the video, President Biden continues to lay out his unity agenda for the nation, focusing on 4 key areas. He emphasizes the need to combat the opioid epidemic by increasing funding for prevention, treatment, and harm reduction, as well as stopping the flow of illicit drugs. He calls for taking on the mental health crisis, particularly among children, by strengthening privacy protections, banning targeted advertising to children, and demanding tech companies stop collecting personal data on children. The president also underlines the need to support veterans, particularly those who were exposed to toxic smoke from burn pits during their service in Iraq and Afghanistan, by expanding eligibility for veterans suffering from respiratory cancers and pushing for a law that ensures they receive the benefits they deserve. Lastly, he advocates for ending cancer as we know it by funding ARPAH, a new agency dedicated to driving breakthroughs in cancer research, similar to DARPA's impact on the defense industry. Biden's unity agenda reflects a commitment to addressing pressing issues facing